western coast of Mexico lies the small town of San Carlos. Although most of the town's 5,000 residents live below the poverty line, it is nonetheless the site of a changing tide.
Es mucha máquina más grande y más malo, y por eso los corren. Cuando andan aquí los corren y se van por otro lado. Mi papá en barcos, trabajando ahí, changueando, y pues en el chango agarran mucho producto, pero ahora con el chinchorro también agarran, pero matan más cría porque es tela más chica, matan más cría. El pescado ya no sale mucho producto. Si lo cuidan, pues tal vez puede haber producto en el futuro, pero como va no creo, porque es mucha matanza.
¿Qué te gustaría que cambiara?
Pues estaría bien que hiciera carreteras, luz, tuviera luz.
About 20% of the protein that humans consume comes from seafood. Yet, about a third of global fisheries are currently in a state of collapse, and that number is growing. So this is a huge potential food problem for the future we've got to fix.
From the large commercial or industrial scale to the small artisanal subsistence fishers, I think all of them are facing extreme pressures as a result of overfishing over the past century, really. And I think there's a race now to basically try and catch the last remaining organisms, whether those are different species or individual pockets of fish. The race to catch what's left is only accelerating.
All Azul is a nonprofit organization working to transition coastal communities to more sustainable livelihoods. In San Carlos, this means collaborating with local communities to develop new alternatives to the more traditional methods of shrimp trawling and pond aquaculture.
In terms of the method that they're harvested, it's a bottom trawling on a massive scale. Places all over the globe, you have these trawling boats that you can see actually the plumes from space.
In wild catch fisheries for shrimp, the most common way of catching them is with a trawler that drags a net along the bottom. It can be incredibly destructive to bottom habitat, and it can also catch a whole bunch of unintended species of both fish and things like turtles. So this kind of bycatch often greatly exceeds the amount of shrimp that are caught. So there are big potential problems with habitat damage as well as incidental effects on the rest of the ecosystem. Most traditional farming of shrimp involves ponds on the land where there's been conversion of coastal habitats into aquaculture farms. These can have really big impacts because they have to destroy coastal habitat. It's often mangroves or other kinds of wetlands that play really important roles for coastal communities and for the ecosystem in the local ocean. Because they're enclosed and growing the shrimp at very high densities with a lot of food, they produce a lot of waste. They often require a lot of chemical treatments such as antibiotics because they're growing in such high densities. And this material then gets released back into the coastal ocean and can have big effects as a pollutant.
Shrimp weren't meant to live in a pond. Shrimp were meant to be in the ocean. Someone once told me that trying to raise marine organisms in a pond would be like trying to raise cattle on a barge in the middle of the ocean. But if you take that same cattle, put it on a range, it's going to thrive just by itself. It's the same thing we're seeing with shrimp.
Gustavo Valdez comes from a fishing family. His father was one of the first trawlers in the neighboring town of Guaymas to modify his gear so it would have less impact on the environment.
my youngest sister challenged my dad about the type of business he was doing for a living. It was a moment of awakening for my father when when he's challenged by a 6-year-old girl on what he does for a living and to sustain his family, and what impact that may have on the environment.
Thanks to their efforts, about 80% of the Guaymas trawling fleet today uses modified gear. To further reduce their environmental footprint, they are now part of a study testing the viability of aquapods as an even more sustainable alternative. 3 miles off the coast of San Carlos, a group of aquapods are moored only 30 feet beneath the surface. At this depth, the shrimp are shallow enough that they can easily be accessed by research and maintenance teams, but deep enough that they are protected from more turbulent waters above. Inside the pods, shrimp swim freely. Seawater flows through mesh panels, bringing in nutrients and carrying away waste products. While aquapods have been used as enclosures for seafood stocks before, this project marks the first time they have been used as an alternative to other forms of shrimp production.
You can imagine huge stocks of shrimp in the wild. We've essentially got those living in a containment space, but within an ecosystem where their existence is appropriate and they fit within the material flow of the food chain and the food web, and the waste doesn't accumulate as it does inshore. And I think one of the most important things when you compare it to trawling is that we can have a wild caught quality shrimp without any bycatch. Shrimp is really the place that you want to start if you want to deal with the negative impact of seafood production. Whether it's trawling or whether it's onshore pond aquaculture, shrimp has some of the biggest problems in terms of sustainability.
Right now, consumers that are really interested in sustainable seafood have a fairly limited number of choices because of the way we traditionally catch or grow seafood in aquaculture. So solving the problems of habitat damage and bycatch and overfishing are really important, given that seafood plays such an important role in human demand for protein, and that's just going to grow. So coming up with a method of producing shrimp that is sustainable and has low environmental impacts would really be a great advance.
For the next generation of San Carlos fishermen, this change cannot come soon enough. Decades of unsustainable shrimp harvest along the Sonoran coast have left towns like San Carlos in serious trouble. With no way to earn a living through fishing, young residents are abandoning the town to try their luck somewhere else. Olazul's efforts to rebuild communities and restore a declining resource may prove to be the best alternative for a sustainable future.